They say every town hides a secret, but no one expected this one to begin with a 17-year-old girl's silent scream in the dark. A girl who vanished in less than 30 seconds, caught on camera one moment, swallowed by the mist the next. But here's the question no one in Ridgewood can answer. How did a responsible, soft-spoken teenager end up tangled in a nightmare woven from lies, obsession, and a truth her own family was terrified to face? Because when detectives finally followed the trail, through broken phones, hidden folders, secret lovers, and a stalker hiding in plain sight, they uncovered something far darker than anyone imagined. And the most chilling part? Emily Carter tried to warn someone. She sent the truth out before she disappeared, and now, that final message is about to expose the darkness no one saw coming. Welcome to Night Crime Stories Hub. Thanks to all my viewers and subscribers for your support. Stay tuned for daily true crime updates. Don't forget to subscribe. The night Emily Carter vanished began like any other in the small suburban town of Ridgeway, the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and believed danger only existed on television. But by the time the clock struck midnight, that illusion had shattered. Emily, just 17, had finished her late shift at Willow Creek Cafe, a tiny place lit by the warm glow of hanging lamps and the hum of quiet conversations. She waved goodbye to her coworkers, stepped outside into the cold air, and disappeared into a darkness no one was prepared to face. Narrators would later say she wasn't the type to run away. Her friends echoed the same thing. Responsible, dependable, always texting her mother the moment she left work. But that night there was nothing. No call, no message, only silence stretching longer than anyone could justify. The first clue came from the cafe's grainy CCTV footage. It showed Emily walking out at 10:47 p.m., her backpack slung over one shoulder, her breath visible in the chilled air. She paused briefly, as if listening to something or someone, just outside the camera's frame. Then she continued down the sidewalk, swallowed by a thick curtain of mist drifting in from the woods behind the town. After that, the footage revealed nothing. One moment she was there, the next she had vanished into the darkness like a whisper. By morning, panic seeped into the town's quiet rhythm. Parents kept their children home. Neighbors gathered in clusters, whispering theories more out of fear than curiosity. The police organized their initial search, canvassing the cafe's surroundings, interviewing the staff, and retracing Emily's usual route home. But hour after hour passed with no leads. Each quiet minute felt heavier, as though the town itself sensed a truth too horrifying to accept. As the sun dipped below the horizon on the first day of her disappearance, detectives widened their search perimeter. That's when an officer spotted something out of place. A cell phone sitting on a park bench at the edge of Ridgeway Forest. Emily's cell phone. The screen was shattered, the casing dented, as if it had been smashed intentionally. And it wasn't lying carelessly. It was deliberately placed, positioned upright, facing directly toward the woods, as though left there as a message. The silence of the trees seemed to deepen, and investigators realized this was no simple missing person case. Someone wanted to be heard. What they didn't know yet was that this clue would pull them into a labyrinth of secrets darker than imagined. A girl with secrets no one knew. The discovery of Emily's smashed phone facing the woods changed the tone of the investigation entirely. What began as a routine missing person case now felt orchestrated, almost theatrical. Detectives brought the device to the digital forensics lab, hoping to retrieve something, anything, that might explain why a responsible, predictable girl vanished without a trace. But Emily's silence raised another question. What was she hiding that no one around her had noticed? When investigators sat down with her mother, Linda Carter, the woman looked exhausted, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. Emily isn't like other teenagers, she insisted. She doesn't sneak out. She doesn't lie. She barely even argues. But as detectives gently pressed for more, Linda admitted there had been changes. Small ones, but unsettling. Emily had been jumpy lately, checking the windows at night, locking her bedroom door, clutching her phone as if it were a lifeline. Linda had chalked it up to stress, convinced her daughter would open up when she was ready. Back at the police station, Emily's laptop became the new focal point. At first glance, it looked ordinary. Schoolwork, playlists, photos with friends. But buried beneath the normalcy was a locked folder. Encrypted, password protected, intentionally hidden. Its name was a single letter, A. The folder's timestamp suggested Emily had accessed it just hours before her disappearance. Detectives exchanged uneasy looks. Teenagers hide things, yes, but encryption wasn't typical. Whatever Emily placed inside wasn't meant for curious eyes. The digital team worked for hours, bypassing layers of protection until, finally, the folder flickered open. Inside were screenshots of late-night calls, blurred images of someone standing outside her window, and messages she had deleted from her phone. Each file revealed a girl living a double life, balancing fear and secrecy in silence. The most chilling part was that despite all this, Emily had told no one. Not her mother, not her friends, not even her older sister. But the true shock came when investigators scrolled to the folder's final document. Bold text filled the screen, a single name. It was a name that instantly rewired the entire investigation. A person who was supposed to have been nothing more than a passing acquaintance in Emily's life, yet now emerged as the silent axis around which every hidden fear seemed to turn suddenly. No one in the room spoke for several seconds, as the weight of that revelation settled like a storm over them. The name on Emily's encrypted folder hit investigators with the force of a cold wave. Aaron Blake. The same Aaron who appeared harmless on the surface, who quietly sipped his coffee at Willow Creek Cafe, always sitting in the same corner seat near the window. A man most people in Ridgeway described as polite, soft-spoken, or simply forgettable. Yet Emily had hidden his name behind layers of encryption, as if even writing it down had frightened her. Within an hour, detectives were at Aaron's small rental house on Sycamore Lane. The transition from the digital discovery to his doorstep felt abrupt, but urgency dictated everything now. Aaron opened the door slowly, blinking as if he had just woken from a long sleep. His expression was unreadable. Calm, composed, almost detached. Too detached, considering a teenage girl he supposedly barely knew was missing. Detective Marlowe wasted no time. "We'd like to ask you a few questions about Emily Carter." Aaron's reaction was unsettlingly mild. No shock, no confusion, no concern. He simply nodded and stepped aside. Inside, everything was neat, almost unnaturally organized. Books arranged by height, surfaces spotless, blinds drawn tight enough to keep daylight from entering. "We've been told you visited the cafe where Emily worked," Marlowe began. Aaron nodded. "Sometimes. It's quiet there." "And how well did you know her?" He hesitated for half a second. "Not well. Just a server. We talked about coffee, school. Nothing important." But the detectives already knew that was a lie, because the CCTV footage from last week showed something entirely different. Emily and Aaron outside the cafe, speaking in low, tense voices. Emily's arms were crossed defensively. Aaron leaned toward her, expression tight, jaw clenched. It was an argument, one that lasted nearly 4 minutes. When the footage was mentioned, Aaron's calm exterior cracked just enough to reveal the strain beneath. "That wasn't an argument," he said too quickly. "I just asked if she was okay." She looked upset. "Upset about what?" Marlowe asked. "I don't know," Aaron whispered, eyes shifting away. His answers were smooth but hollow, like rehearsed lines missing their emotion. Every detail raised more questions. Why had Emily encrypted his name? Why had Aaron lied about knowing her? And why did he seem so utterly unfazed by her disappearance? Detectives left the house uneasy, their instincts screaming that Aaron was hiding something dangerous. They didn't have to wait long for the next thread to appear. That evening, a neighbor from Sycamore Lane called the police with a trembling voice. She claimed that just days before Emily vanished, she had seen Aaron's car creeping slowly behind the girl as she walked home, its headlights dimmed, and its driver staring straight ahead. The report of Aaron's car following Emily tightened the investigation around him, but detectives' new assumptions could be fatal in a case already tangled with secrets. They returned to Emily's digital trail, hoping her own words would reveal the truth that no one else seemed willing to speak. What they found instead was a slow descent into emotional chaos, weeks of messages that painted a picture far darker than they imagined. Many texts were fragmented, deleted, or hidden in secondary messaging apps. But even the remaining ones were enough to expose a pattern. Someone had been manipulating her, subtly at first, then with open cruelty. Messages like, "You're imagining things again," and "If you really cared, you'd listen to me," and even "You don't need anyone else, just me." The tone was unmistakably controlling, an erosion of her independence disguised as concern. At first, investigators believed Aaron was the one behind those messages. The encryption, the lies, the neighbor's sighting, everything pointed toward him. But as they dug deeper, cracks formed in that theory. The writing style in the messages didn't match Aaron's formal, steady speech patterns. The timestamps didn't align with his work schedule. And then came the turning point. A string of texts exchanged the same night Emily disappeared. One message, short but unmistakable. Read, "Meet me tonight. Don't tell him." Detectives froze at the wording. Him. Emily wasn't being manipulated by Aaron alone, or perhaps not by him at all. Someone else had her caught in a different web, someone closer to her age, someone she trusted enough to keep secrets for. Using phone tower data, investigators started mapping Emily's final conversations. The shift was immediate. In the hours leading up to her disappearance, she exchanged rapid-fire texts with an unidentified number. Short messages, urgent, emotional, frantic. Someone was pulling her away from Aaron's orbit and into another one filled with unanswered questions. Detectives searched nearby businesses for any visual corroboration. That's when a gas station clerk down the road from Willow Creek Cafe mentioned something odd. Around the time Emily walked out of the cafe, a girl matching her description appeared on his exterior cameras. The footage was grainy, tinted blue by outdated surveillance equipment, but it was unmistakably Emily. She looked nervous, scanning her surroundings before stepping off the curb. Then a car rolled into frame. Not Aaron's, not even the same model. The driver leaned over, the passenger door pushed open, and Emily climbed inside without hesitation. The car pulled away into the darkness, leaving investigators with one chilling truth. Someone else had reached her first. The sight of Emily willingly entering a car that wasn't Aaron's forced investigators to reconsider everything they thought they understood. If she climbed in without fear, the driver had to be someone she trusted, someone whose presence wouldn't raise alarms. That possibility led detectives to pull every phone number Emily contacted in the last month. One number stood out. Frequent late-night calls, long conversations, abrupt hang-ups, and hours-long silences afterward. It belonged to Liam Hayes, a 19-year-old with no previous mention in her interviews or digital files. When investigators approached Liam, he seemed startled, not just by Emily's disappearance, but by the fact that anyone knew his name at all. He hesitated before letting them into his small, cluttered apartment, his hands trembling slightly. The living room smelled faintly of cologne and stale energy drinks, the kind of space belonging to someone who hadn't slept properly in days. Once seated, Liam spoke softly, almost apologetically. She didn't want people knowing about us, he said. Her mom would have freaked out, and she didn't want drama at school, so we kept it private. His voice cracked on the last word. Detectives exchanged glances. The secrecy made sense with what they already knew. Emily had been hiding more than anyone realized. What happened the night she disappeared? Detective Marlowe asked. Liam swallowed hard. We were supposed to meet. She told me she needed to talk. Something urgent. But she never showed up. I waited almost an hour. What time did you get there? Around 10:30. And your phone? It was off. His jaw tightened. Battery died. But the detectives had already checked tower records. His phone didn't die. It had been powered off manually for nearly 3 crucial hours, the same block of time during which Emily vanished. Why turn it off, Liam? Marlowe pressed. His eyes darted toward the window. I needed some space. We argued earlier that day. I just wanted to clear my head. It wasn't a convincing answer. His hands clenched, his breathing uneven. The facade of a grieving boyfriend began to crack, exposing something more complicated. Jealousy? Guilt? Panic? Investigators couldn't yet tell. Before leaving, Detective Marlowe asked to search Liam's car. He resisted at first. Another small but telling hesitation, but eventually handed over the keys. The interior was messy, fast food wrappers scattered across the floor, clothes tossed in the back seat. It looked ordinary, unremarkable, until Marlowe reached under the passenger seat and his hand froze. He pulled out a delicate silver bracelet, the one Emily wore every day, the one she never took off. And suddenly, Liam's innocence didn't feel innocent at all. Finding Emily's bracelet under Liam's passenger seat ignited a storm around him. But the moment detectives began pushing harder, his composure shattered. Liam swore he was being set up, his voice cracking, his hands shaking as he insisted over and over that he never touched Emily that night. At first, it sounded like desperation. But the more he spoke, the more his panic felt real, not rehearsed. "They want you to look at me," he said, pacing his small apartment. "But I didn't hurt her. Someone planted that bracelet. Someone who knew we were together. Someone who wanted you to turn against me." Detective Marlowe wasn't convinced, but something about the certainty in Liam's voice forced him to pause. If Liam was guilty, he was either the best liar they had ever seen, or the most terrified innocent man in Ridgeway. Still, the evidence against him was troubling. The turned-off phone, the secret relationship, the bracelet hidden under a seat he claimed Emily had never sat in. But before they could press further, a new lead emerged, one that cracked the case's direction wide open. A local woman contacted the station after seeing Emily's photo on the news. She claimed she had seen Emily earlier on the day she vanished, inside a convenience store near the highway, not arguing with a man, not with Liam, not even with Aaron. She was talking to a woman, the witness said. Emily was crying. The woman kept telling her to calm down. A woman. Investigators exchanged a quiet, startled look. This was the first mention of one. They drove to the convenience store, where the clerk nodded immediately when shown Emily's picture. "Yeah, she was here." Looked upset. "Was she alone?" Marlowe asked. "No," the clerk replied. "There was someone with her." "Do you remember what she looked like?" "Sure," he said. "Older than Emily. Kinda looked like her too. Same eyes." The shift was immediate. A family resemblance? That narrowed the pool quickly. The clerk agreed to release the store's surveillance footage. When the video loaded, the investigators leaned closer, the screen flickering with grainy images. Emily appeared first, tearful, anxious. Seconds later, a woman stepped into frame, grabbed Emily's arm, and leaned in with a stern whisper. It wasn't a stranger. It was Sarah Carter, Emily's older sister. The same sister who claimed she wasn't even in town. When detectives confronted Sarah Carter with the convenience store footage, her confident facade crumbled almost instantly. The moment the grainy video showed her gripping Emily's arm, Sarah's breath hitched. Her shoulders slumping as though a weight she'd been carrying for years had finally become unbearable. She didn't try to deny it. She didn't even ask how they found the footage. She simply whispered, "I didn't want it to get this far." In the interrogation room, Sarah's hands shook as she spoke. "Yes, I was in town. I came back that morning. Emily called me the night before, crying, panicking. She said she needed to talk. Said she discovered something. Something that could ruin everything." Her voice quivered. "She begged me not to tell Mom." Detective Marlowe leaned forward. What was she planning to expose? Sarah stared at the table, eyes empty. "I can't say." "Can't?" Marlowe repeated. "Or won't?" Sarah didn't answer. She just pressed her lips tightly together, tears beginning to spill. Her silence was the loudest admission of all. She wasn't protecting herself. She was protecting someone else. Someone Emily feared. Someone Emily believed could destroy her family if the truth came out. The idea of a hidden family secret shifted the investigation dramatically. Was Emily afraid of Aaron? Of Liam? Or had she been terrified of someone inside her own home? Detectives left the room with more questions than answers, but one thing was clear. Sarah knew far more than she was willing to say. Hours later, officers searched the Carter home again, this time with sharper eyes and a different mindset. What they uncovered made Sarah's silence even more disturbing. In Emily's room, beneath a loose floorboard near the baseboard heater, an officer found a small floral journal, its cover faded and edges worn from being opened and closed in secrecy. Emily's diary. The discovery sent a ripple through the entire team. Whatever Emily felt she couldn't tell anyone, she had written here, in ink only she expected to read. The diary was placed gently on the kitchen table, and after a moment of tense hesitation, Detective Marlowe opened it to the first page. The words were shaky, rushed, but unmistakably terrified. I think someone is watching me. I think I have a stalker. The room fell silent. The investigation had just plunged into a far darker direction, one Emily had been trying to warn them about long before she disappeared. The discovery of Emily's diary shifted the entire investigation onto unfamiliar, unsettling ground. Detectives had expected typical teenage entries, frustrations with school, falling outs with friends, maybe occasional notes about Liam or the mounting pressure at home. Instead, they found page after page documenting a private nightmare Emily had never shared aloud. The chapter of her life no one knew existed began quietly, almost innocently, but her handwriting grew sharper, more frantic, as the entries unfolded. She wrote of footsteps behind her during early morning jogs, of seeing a figure standing across the street from her house for hours, of notes left on her car windshield, simple phrases like "I see you and don't pretend you're alone." Emily mentioned she recognized the handwriting, though she never wrote down the name. It was as if she feared even the diary might betray her. Detectives pinned copies of the notes on the wall of the incident room, the inked threats stark beneath the fluorescent lights. Each scrap of paper felt like a piece of a puzzle Emily had been trying desperately to solve before it consumed her. And now it was up to the investigators to finish what she started. One particular entry caught their attention. Emily described a moment where the stalker stood so close behind her she could hear them breathing. She wrote how she froze, terrified, and how the person whispered her name before disappearing into the trees near the school parking lot. That detail, whispering, not speaking, indicated familiarity. She wasn't afraid of a stranger lurking in the dark. She feared someone who knew her well enough to say her name softly, almost intimately. Someone she trusted, Detective Rowan murmured, scanning the diary's pages. Or someone who wanted her to think she could. The investigation team broadened the handwriting analysis, comparing the notes with samples from teachers, classmates, family members, neighbors, anyone who might have crossed paths with Emily. Most came back inconclusive or irrelevant. But one note, the most threatening of them all, produced a result that made the room fall silent. The analyst's report arrived late in the evening, the envelope thick and official. Rowan sliced it open and scanned the page, his expression tightening with each line he read. He set the report down slowly, deliberately, as though it might detonate. The handwriting showed a direct, undeniable match to someone already tangled in Emily's life. The ink belonged to Aaron Blake. The moment Aaron Blake's name surfaced in the handwriting analysis, the investigative team surged into motion. The transition from suspicion to action was immediate. After the disturbing diary revelations, after the scattered clues that led nowhere, this finally felt like a breakthrough. And so, before dawn, a full tactical unit assembled outside Aaron's quiet suburban home, moving with silent precision across dew-coated grass. Neighbors peeked through blinds as officers breached the door, announcing themselves as they swept through the dimly lit house. At first glance, Aaron's home appeared ordinary. Neatly organized shelves, a spotless kitchen, nothing to suggest the darkness investigators feared. But a detective noticed faint scrape marks along the hallway baseboard. A portion of the wall sounded hollow when tapped. Within minutes, they uncovered a concealed latch behind a framed college certificate. The hidden door swung inward with a groan, revealing a narrow staircase descending into a cramped, windowless room. The breath left the officer's lungs. Inside, Dozens of photographs of Emily lined the walls, some taken from afar, others unsettlingly close. A row of binders held printouts of her social media posts, school schedules, even maps of her jogging routes. Timestamps chronicled nearly every movement she made over the last 6 months. Printed texts, messages Emily never responded to, were taped neatly in patterns only obsessive logic could decipher. Detective Rowan scanned the meticulous layout. "This wasn't a moment of impulse," he said quietly. "This is long-term fixation." But then something strange emerged. Every item, every photo, note, log entry, stopped abruptly 2 weeks before Emily disappeared. The final timestamp circled in red ink read, 14 days before. Not a single piece of evidence extended beyond that. "Why stop?" another detective murmured. "Stalkers don't just quit." Rowan felt an uneasy shift in the air. Unless someone wanted it to look like Aaron continued. Even after he didn't. The deeper they searched, the clearer the pattern became. Aaron's obsession was real, painfully real, but something about the final weeks didn't align with his methodical habits. The style of the last printed message was slightly different. The ink lighter, the spacing inconsistent. Felt hurried. Imposter work. And then came the discovery that shattered the room's fragile silence. A single fingerprint, smudged but intact, clung to the top corner of the last printed message. The only one dated close to Emily's disappearance. Forensics processed it on-site, the machine humming as tension knotted the air. The result flashed across the screen. The print did not belong to Aaron. It belonged to Liam. The fingerprint result changed everything. Liam's name, once floating on the edges of suspicion, now sat squarely at the center of the investigation. Detectives wasted no time bringing him back into the interrogation room. The moment he saw the evidence folder, thin, unassuming, yet damning, his confidence faltered. His shoulders stiffened, his breath stuttered, and the carefully rehearsed calm he'd carried for days cracked. Detective Rowan placed the printed message on the table. "Your fingerprint," he said, tapping the corner. "Explain." Liam's eyes darted from the paper to the mirrored wall, as if hunting for a way out. I wasn't stalking her," he stammered. "I found those things in Aaron's house weeks ago. I followed him once. Okay? I knew something was off. I was trying to protect her." Rowan leaned forward. Protect her by sneaking into someone's house? By touching a message meant to terrorize her? Silence smothered the room before Liam finally broke. His voice dropped, trembling. "I knew about Aaron. I knew he was watching her. So I watched him. And when I realized he wasn't the only problem, when I saw how scared she was, I didn't know what to do." He ran a trembling hand through his hair. "But I swear, I never hurt her." The detectives exchanged glances. His story was shifting again. "What happened the night she disappeared?" Rowan asked. Liam swallowed hard. "She texted me earlier. She said she needed space, that things were getting too heavy." He paled. "I panicked. I thought someone else was getting to her. So, I followed her." "Where?" "To the edge of Ridgewood Forest. She walked fast, like she didn't want anyone to see her. I called her name, but she freaked out and ran." His breath hitched. "I didn't chase her. I just watched her go. I know how that sounds, but I didn't touch her. I didn't. It wasn't enough. Not with the lies. Not with the secrecy. Not with the growing puzzle that seemed to twist tighter with every new piece." Detective Rowan's voice stayed cold. "If you cared so much, why turn your phone off for 3 hours?" Liam had no answer. Minutes later, officers escorted him out, his expression a mix of fear and resignation. Outside the station, search teams prepared to comb the surrounding forest again. This time with new urgency, new suspicion, and a new sense of dread. Within the hour, the K-9 unit arrived. The handlers released the dogs at the trailhead where Liam claimed Emily had run. The dogs lowered their noses, snorted, and pulled forward sharply, finding a scent. It led deeper into the dark, silent forest. The dogs pulled hard, their bodies tense with certainty, guiding the search team deeper into Ridgewood Forest. The air grew colder as the canopy thickened, the sunlight swallowed by branches that seemed to lean inward like silent witnesses. Every step felt heavier, as though the woods themselves were holding their breath. Detective Rowan followed the dogs along a narrow path until they suddenly stopped in a small clearing, a patch of disturbed earth framed by snapped twigs and scattered leaves. Something had happened here, recently. Over here, one of the officers called, crouched near the edge of the clearing. Rowan approached and saw it, a silver pendant glinting faintly beneath a thin layer of dirt. Emily's pendant, the one she wore every day, the one her mother said she never took off. The chain was broken, the clasp bent as if torn violently. A murmur spread through the team. This was the first real sign of Emily since the night she vanished. But the unease deepened when they noticed the ground. Multiple impressions dotted the soil, some shallow, some deep, some overlapping in a chaotic tangle. Rowan motioned for the forensic techs to begin plaster casting. "These are Emily's," one tech said, pointing to the smaller footprints. "And these," he gestured to a heavier set, "likely belong to Liam or Aaron. But these—" Rowan knelt beside a third set, faint but visible, angled as though someone had circled the clearing. "These aren't either of theirs. Different shoe size, different tread. A third person. Someone the investigation had never considered, or someone hiding in plain sight. If Emily ran from Liam, and Liam wasn't alone, then someone else intercepted her that night." The entire timeline fractured once more. "Detective," another officer called from a few feet away, his voice tight. "You're going to want to see this." Rowan walked over, bracing himself. The officer held up a small, torn scrap of fabric caught on a low branch. Dark, weather-worn, but unmistakable in pattern and color. Rowan's stomach tightened. He had seen that fabric before, during the interview at the Carter home, draped casually over the back of a chair. It matched Sarah Carter's jacket, the sister who claimed she hadn't even been in town, the sister who knew more than she had ever admitted. And now, her presence in the woods could no longer be denied. The torn fabric dangled in the evidence bag like a silent accusation. When detectives brought it into the interrogation room, Sarah's expression shifted, just barely, but enough for Rowan to see the truth begin to crack through her carefully constructed lies. She sat perfectly still, hands clasped tightly, eyes fixed on the table as if looking away would make the evidence disappear. "Sarah," Rowan began gently, "your jacket was in those woods. We found your footprints. You were there the night Emily disappeared." For a long moment, she didn't move. And then, as if the fight had drained out of her body all at once, her shoulders sagged. "Fine," she whispered. "I was there." Rowan exhaled slowly. "Why didn't you tell us?" Sarah's eyes glistened, and when she spoke, her voice trembled. Not just from fear, but from years of buried pain. "Because everything started long before Emily went missing." She paused, swallowing hard, as though forcing herself to relive every memory she had spent her life trying to bury. "Our father," she said quietly. "He wasn't who everyone thought he was." The room went still. Sarah continued, her words spilling out like a confession she had been holding back for years. "He hurt me, for so long. Emily only found out recently. She found my old journals. She confronted me, begged me to go to the police, said we had to expose what he'd done." Her voice cracked. "But she didn't understand. Exposing him meant destroying everything. Our mother, our family, our lives. Mom would have fallen apart." Rowan leaned forward. "So you followed her that night?" "Yes." Tears streamed freely now. "I was terrified she would tell someone. Terrified I'd lose everything all over again. I tried to talk to her, to calm her down. But she was so angry. She wouldn't stop." Sarah buried her face in her hands. "She tried to run. I grabbed her arm. She pulled away, stepped back, and she fell. Her head hit a rock. She didn't move. Silence suffocated the room. It was an accident, she whispered. But I panicked. I couldn't let anyone blame me. So I took her phone. I staged everything. The texts, the car, the bracelet. Liam, Aaron. They were distractions. I didn't mean for any of it to go this far. Her confession hung heavy in the air. Raw, tragic, devastating. Rowan finally stood. Sarah, you need to understand. This isn't just about what happened that night. It's about the truth you've been running from your whole life. Sarah didn't answer. She simply closed her eyes. But the case wasn't finished. Minutes later, an officer rushed in, breathless. Detective, there's something else. Emily sent an email the night she disappeared. With attachments, evidence. And it wasn't sent to the police. Rowan froze. Someone else had the truth. And they hadn't come forward yet.